for this wonderful and powerful opening. Dear Excellencies, Presidents, dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 20th edition of the Bled Strategic Forum titled A Runaway World. You know, I may be one of the most stubborn people in Europe or even in the world, because for years, and it was really years, I've stood here and I said the same thing, that human rights, the rule of law, cooperation, solidarity and multilateralism, and above all, decency, must be more than words. They must guide the actions of the international community. And yet, the world keeps testing this belief. The war in Ukraine, the devastation in Gaza and the Middle East, the unbearable suffering in Sudan. These are not just distant tragedies. They are symptoms of our collective failure to act when it matters the most. Still, I refuse to give up. I say these words not out of habit, but out of conviction, because I believe someone is listening. And because I believe that even in a runaway world, change is still possible. As a Slovenian and as a European, I believe in Europe, united, resilient, democratic and just. A Europe that leads not only with influence, but with principle. That defends the truth, protects the vulnerable, and knows that real dialogue begins with decency and respect. This is the Europe we must build, and we should have started long time ago. But now we can wait no longer. Before I close, let me take a moment to thank my extraordinary team, perhaps even more stubborn than I am, and all our friends and partners, old and new. Your dedication and trust give this forum its strength and meaning. With that, I officially open the 20th anniversary of the Bled Strategic Forum International Conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. It began here, in this very hall, almost 20 years ago. The world has changed beyond recognition. With the orchestra beside us, let us turn back the wheel of time and rediscover where and when it all began.
Imagine you could travel back in time to August 2006. There were 1.6 billion fewer people living on Earth, and the global economy was less than half the size it is today. Only 17% of the world's population had access to the internet. Today, nearly 70% are connected to the web. Back then, a relatively unknown network called Facebook was only open to college students in a handful of countries. And Twitter, an obscure website, had only been made public a month earlier. The European Union that had just welcomed 10 new member states would add another 3 over the following decade. And, for the first time in its history, see a member leave the Union. Carbon dioxide emissions were 27% lower than they are today. As a result, we have now, for the first time in human history, crossed the critical threshold of 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. In 2006, people would not have understood words like iPhone, hashtag, unfollow, and crowdfunding, which were yet to be invented. Several extraordinary discoveries in science were still to come to light. Few foresaw that within 2 years, the world would plunge into the greatest economic and financial meltdown since the 1930s, only to be eclipsed in just over a decade by the Great Shutdown, caused by a global outbreak of a new disease. Old conflicts would continue, and new ones would erupt. At the same time, huge steps were made towards solving seemingly unsolvable challenges. And for the first time ever, a common blueprint for a sustainable future of our planet would be agreed upon. The world has changed, and we have followed suit. Since 2006, the Bled Strategic Forum has brought together nearly 18,000 participants from more than 100 countries, including over 70 heads of state and government, almost 400 foreign and other ministers, and more than 2,100 media representatives. Exchanging views, seeking solutions, leading. Welcome to the 20th edition of the Bled Strategic Forum.
As we turn from reflection to leadership, it is my honor to welcome on stage Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign and European Affairs, Ms. Tanja Fajon.
Esteemed guests from near and far, dear friends of Bled Strategic Forum. 20 years ago, Slovenia launched this forum with a simple belief. Diplomacy must serve people and not power. That belief resonates even more urgently today. We gather in Bled in the midst of crisis, in the midst of wars, injustice and deep uncertainty, in what truly feels like a runaway world. Fear too often divides us or paralyzes us. And in such turbulent times, we need steady anchors. The rule of law, shared solidarity and a moral conscience. Slovenia strives to be one of them. As a member of the European Union and as a member of NATO and the UN Security Council, Slovenia does not stand on the sidelines. We believe peace is built through diplomacy, justice through law, and security through cooperation. But how do we turn these principles into action? Let me present our 3 tests of commitment. The first is Ukraine. Russia's aggression in direct attack on Europe's peace and security. Slovenia and the European Union stand firmly with Ukraine, supporting its right to a free, sovereign and unified future. Peace cannot come at the cost of justice or territorial integrity. We reject outcome that rewards aggression. Together with our European and transatlantic partners, we will continue to provide long-term security, reconstruction support, and a clear path to European Union membership. Ukraine's future is Europe's future, and we will not turn away. Second is Gaza. The situation in Gaza and beyond. It is beyond our imagination. Every single day, because of relentless bombings and deliberate starvation. An entire classroom of children is lost. Day after day, the numbers grow. Life-saving humanitarian aid is deliberately blocked. While lives are extinguished before the world's eyes and entire families are erased. Slovenia recognized the state of Palestine because we believe peace demands justice, and a viable two-state solution is the only way forward. We acted, imposing an arms embargo on Israel, banning settlement imports, and declaring 2 extremist ministers persona non grata. We've sent emergency aid and continue to demand unimpeded humanitarian access. At the upcoming UN General Assembly in September, we will advocate for wider recognition of Palestine and a renewed push for peace. A ceasefire is urgent. Hostages must be released, and aid must flow. We are also considering joining South Africa's case before the International Court of Justice, because accountability cannot wait, and neither can justice. And while Gaza commands the world's attention, it is not the only humanitarian crisis. From Sudan to other regions torn by war and hunger, millions more are suffering, often in silence. Finally, we turn to the Western Balkans. Enlargement is not a favor. It is a geostrategic necessity. The region must pursue reforms that strengthen democracy, the rule of law and human rights, while the European Union must honour its commitments. We commend peaceful civic demonstrations, including in Serbia, as vital expressions of European aspiration. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the strict enforcement of court rulings is essential to uphold the rule of law and ensure accountability. Investing in youth is essential to create opportunities that counter the lure of emigration. Slovenia remains committed to fostering dialogue and advancing future where the Western Balkans, alongside with Moldova, Ukraine, is fully integrated in Europe. Peace is no longer threatened only by bullets. It is also under attack from lies. Democracies cannot survive without truth, yet today disinformation, foreign interference and the misuse of artificial intelligence are eroding our trust, distorting reality and weakening democratic institutions from within. As a former journalist myself, I have seen how dangerous the collapse of shared truth can be. In this environment, we must urgently restore effective multilateralism, choosing cooperation over confrontation, reform over deadlock, and human dignity over manipulation. And peace must be inclusive. Women, so often the first to suffer in conflict, must also be the first to shape its resolution. Slovenia remains a committed champion of the women, peace and security agenda. So how do we, friends, resolve all these crises? First, we must unite Europe and our NATO allies behind a bold and principled global role. Second, we must restore effective multilateralism, a UN Security Council that acts decisively and not stalls. Third, we must uphold international law consistently without double standards. And fourth, we must choose truth over fear, justice over silence, and people over power. And as a foreign minister, I have seen the quiet strength of diplomacy, of building trust, seeking political solutions, and listening with intent. Even a small country can make a meaningful difference when it stands firmly for international law and acts with principles in times of crisis. Today, over 120 armed conflicts are raging around the world, while Europe faces economic uncertainty with projected growth of just 1.1% in 2025 and 0.9% in the euro area. And this volatile global landscape, Europe must rise not just as an economic actor, but also as a force for principle. And the EU may not be a traditional military power, but it possesses immense influence. The influence of values, diplomacy, law, and example. And that influence is strongest when rooted in unity, especially among neighbours. Slovenia's close cooperation with our neighbours, Italy, Austria, Croatia and Hungary, all fellow EU members, shows how regional trust can strengthen Europe's global voice. And we must now use the influence more boldly to defend truth, support peace and strengthen global cooperation. In a world that often seems to be spinning out of control, principled leadership matters. And Slovenia is proving that even a small country can lead, and with courage, with conscience, and a steadfast commitment to justice, human dignity and international law. And we will continue to do so, and I invite you all, today and tomorrow, to embrace our brainstorming activism of the Bled Strategic Forum and take an active role in shaping solutions that can make a world a fairer and a safer place. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Madam Minister. For 2 decades, the Bled Strategic Forum has been a crossroads of ideas and voices that shape our times. Let us now look back at some of the faces that have stood on this stage and at the numbers that tell the story of a world growing, changing, and struggling.
We've not started this war. We are defending our territory and we want to restore the territorial integrity.
I believe we must be ready on both sides by 2030 to enlarge.
This forum has become a tradition, and it is also a testament to Slovenia's global leadership.
Dear guests, before we set sail on new discussions and build on the legacy we have just revisited, it is my honor to invite to the stage the President of the Republic of Slovenia, Ms. Nataša Pirc-Musar.
Dear Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of Slovenia, Urška Klakočar Zupančič, Prime Minister of the Republic of Slovenia, Dr. Robert Golob, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the 20th Bled Strategic Forum. 2 years ago, I had the privilege of watching a retrospective of past forum editions. Apparently, some members of the organizing team secretly shed tears of pride, and I would say rightly so. It is hard to comprehend the amount of time and energy that goes into making these events a success. So to all the BSF teams over the years, thank you. Much has changed in the last 2 decades. The glory days are over for our continent. Europe is no longer the global political and economic heavyweight. Nevertheless, countries across the world, big and small, want Europe as a reliable partner. A strong Europe, they say, can be an ally of those unwilling to be dependent on or commanded by the great powers. It is an honor to see the rest of the world wanting Europe to remain a vital player in international relations. However, we risk the opposite by giving it to politicians and political parties who prefer a weaker, less interconnected and less inclusive Europe. They believe bilateralism dwarfs multilateralism. They reject the very values on which European integration rests. Today, it is therefore more important than ever to discuss these values, the values that makes us human. It frightens me to say, but I must. 25 years ago, the European Union adopted the slogan, "United in diversity." Yet today, I fear we are not even close to making this commitment a reality. Instead of unity, we drift towards disunity. Ladies and gentlemen, is this how we wish to cooperate with and compete against the great powers? I hope not. I hope Europe will become a respected player in the international world stage. I hope that geopolitical discussions affecting and decisions affecting Europe are not and will not be made without Europe. And I hope Europe continues to stand firmly behind the central premise of the epilogue to the war of aggression against Ukraine. That no decision about Ukraine's future are made without Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe will only be competitive if we learn to set aside our differences and self-interests for the success of the Union and all its citizens. This will only be possible if we believe in Europe as an economic and political project that everyone understands and supports. In such a Europe, we will not question democracy as a way of life. We will take the single market seriously. We will care for the poor, the elderly and the vulnerable. And we will know how to fight for our interests as Europeans. Then there is diversity. There can be no respect for a diversity without basic human rights. That, however, is not the case. 70 years after the integration began, and 35 years since the Cold War ended, skepticism about human rights is spreading. Xenophobia and intolerance towards those who are different or think differently are major challenges. So are the denial of women's rights, marginalization of minorities, scapegoating of migrants, and alarmingly, support of genocidal and apartheid policies. Excellencies, esteemed guests, Only 80 years have passed since the end of the Second World War. Only 80 years. And we already seem to have forgotten how vital human rights and dignity are for civilization and social progress. So deep is this collective amnesia that even the prevention of genocide, the most abhorrent crime against humanity, no longer carries the urgency it once did. I'm not here to compare the dehumanization of millions under Nazism and fascism, leading to the Holocaust and other crimes against humanity. Far from it. But I must say this. The world condemned the Srebrenica genocide and brought its perpetrators to justice. Why then, only 3 decades later, do some politicians tolerate, even defend, the Israel's genocidal policy against Palestinians in Gaza? The international community resoundingly condemned Hamas's terrorist attack in October 2023. How come? We have no such consensus when it comes to people living in Gaza. How can it be that there are still politicians, including in European Union member states, who tolerate that most people in Gaza have been displaced multiple times? That more than 90% of homes are damaged or destroyed? How can they accept acute shortages of food, water, fuel, medicine, and shelter? Or reports of Israel negotiating with South Sudan to transfer people from one war-torn land at risk of famine to another? Or the fact that humanitarian workers and doctors themselves are starving while trying to help those in need? How can they not be moved after the news hit the world that the Gaza City and surrounding areas are now, ladies and gentlemen, officially under famine? Distinguished guests, these are not rhetorical questions. As human beings, we must ensure that the Gaza Strip and the West Bank never fade from the political spotlight from several reasons. Firstly, because through our dealings with Gaza, we reveal who we are. Gaza has become a symbol of our attitude towards atrocities worldwide. If we cannot address Gaza, what legitimacy do we have to confront gross violations of human rights anywhere else? Secondly, because our handling of Gaza reflects our understanding of humanity. When Europe advocates human rights as universal values, do we truly mean it, or are they merely a tool for dominating political discourse? Thirdly, because humanity is indivisible. We are rightly united in strong condemning Russia's aggression against Ukraine. We stand with the Ukrainian people and support the principle of territorial integrity. We cannot allow a country to seize another country's territory just because it can. We cannot allow people to be killed merely for defending their country against an aggressor. In Ukraine, we defend international law and humanity. Values and norms are values and norms. Everywhere, for everyone, also in Gaza. Fourthly, because Europe needs to show unity in defending humanity. The EU's ultimate response to Israel's actions in Gaza will show the world how our leaders see Europe's future. Whether democracy, unity, diversity and trust in international law remain at the center of the European integration. That being said, I find little cause for optimism. Attacks on democracy and fundamental freedoms are visible basically everywhere. Many of us grew up with leaders criticizing autocracies during the Cold War. Several of those regimes endure, and their practices are spreading regrettably, even in Europe. Freedom of thought, academic freedom, and investigative journalism once shaped democratic discourse. Not anymore. And this is wrong. This is historically wrong. Without freedom of thought, there can be no progress. Attempts to restrict free speech are always met with resistance. Those who suppress freedom of thought and critical thinking always end up on the scrap heap of history. With this in mind, I would like to express my support for the initiative to award the Nobel Peace Prize to Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the West Bank and Gaza, and to the doctors caring for the people of Gaza. They deserve recognition. They deserve recognition for risking their lives to restore peace and uphold humanity. They embody what multilateralism for human rights also means, preventing individual politicians from acting with impunity. Dear friends, we cannot stand by and watch history unfold without us. We must not let cold pragmatism drain the soul from Europe. Now is the time to speak truth. Bold, unwavering truth to power. To bring the united in diversity back to the very heart of the European dream in an enlarged European Union. Human rights and human dignity flourish in a world that is stable and just. But it is in times of crisis and uncertainty that the true test begins. The test of our courage, our conviction, our willingness to stand firm and defend our values. Now is the time to raise our voices, not in whispers of compromise, but in a thunder of determination. Let us reject those who bend their values to the winds of profit and personal gain. Let us fight for a Europe that speaks out loudly through every multilateral forum, against injustice and exclusion, against every crime against humanity, and for every silenced voice. Ladies and gentlemen, as leaders, we shape the future, a path towards democracy, prosperity, and peace, or a spiral into fear, crisis, and war. This is our moment to choose the side of history we will stand on. Billions, ladies and gentlemen, billions depend on our choice. We Slovenians believe in justice, and we have no doubt. We stand firmly and proudly on the side of humanity. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, international TV presenter and journalist, Ali Aslan.
Madam President, thank you so much again for your very powerful and moving speech. Let's give it up one more time for Madam President. Thank you so much. And thank you, of course, for a wonderful opening to the Bled Strategic Orchestra, ladies and gentlemen. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are here for the 20th anniversary of the Bled Strategic Forum, and we are here to celebrate 2 decades of fostering dialogue and cooperation. You've seen in the videos the humble beginnings of this conference, and looking here into the audience, you can with confidence say that the Bled Strategic Forum has turned into one of the most prestigious and important conferences, not only in this region, but all around the globe. Congratulations to Tanja Fajon and congratulations to Peter Gierk. Once again, this is your applause. Now, I myself, I've been part of this forum. I've had the privilege of being part of this forum since 2018. You might have seen me up there on the memory video there. And it's so great to see so many familiar faces that have shaped the forums here throughout the years. I'm seeing, of course, the former president, Borut Pahor. Great to see you, gentlemen. Always a pleasure. We've had the pleasure of being on stage here numerous times, and of course I'm seeing my very, very good friend, Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama, here in the audience. Prime Minister, you and I had our fair share of moments here on this stage. I think we went viral a couple of times. It's always great to see you. Congratulations on your re-election. But I also see many new faces here, new additions. Of course, the President of the European Council. I'm seeing Antonio Costa. Welcome, gentlemen, here to Bled for the very first time, at least in your new capacity. And of course, I'm seeing EU High Representative Kaja Kallas also here with us. Welcome to you as well. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation here later on this very stage. Now, 20 years, it might be quite unlikely because I'm looking at many fresh and young faces here, but is there anyone here by any chance who's attended all 20 editions of the Bled Strategic Forum? Let's see a show of hands. All 20? None. 1? Okay, right there. You'll get the medal later on, remind me. Who else? Who's been here? Right here, one more time. Okay, you got to share the medal. We only 20 times. That's a proud achievement. So you are witness, and you have witnessed the steady rise of this forum into what it is today. Who's here for the very first time? The very first time at the Bled Strategic Forum. So I'm seeing quite a number of hands. You're in for a treat. Congratulations, indeed. Now, 20 years, an anniversary, a birthday is always reason to celebrate. But, ladies and gentlemen, it goes without saying that this anniversary, of course, comes at a time when the world is in disarray, when it is hurting. So, of course, this is also a somber moment in time. And we have seen the video of your predecessor, Antonio Costa. We've seen Charles Michel standing up here on this very stage 2 years ago, making the pledge that the EU should be ready to admit Western Balkan countries into the EU by 2030. And our first panel, yes, please. The Bled Pledge, if you will, the Bled Pledge, as we call it, as the organizers call it. And in the very first panel, in the opening panel here of today, we want to see what has remained, if anything, of the Bled Pledge. Is it a dream or is it a reality? I'm very much looking forward to a very powerful panel. The first panel, as you know, traditionally here at the Bled Strategic Forum always focuses and looks at current events and developments in this region, in the Western Balkans. Certainly no shortage of topics here to be discussed during the first panel, which is being set up right behind me. As you can see, I'm very much looking forward to a very, very powerful panel here in Bled. 20th anniversary, that is quite an achievement. And while the chairs are being set up, I'm very delighted to call up one by one the distinguished speakers of the opening panel, once again titled The Bled Pledge, A Dream or Reality? The first speaker, of course, we've heard from the Foreign Minister, we've heard from the President. Now I'm delighted to welcome to the stage the Prime Minister of Slovenia. Please welcome Robert Golob. Always good to see you. And your names are right there projected on stage, so there shouldn't be any confusion. Also, delighted to welcome to the stage the European Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Kost, ladies and gentlemen, is here. Commissioner, wonderful to have you. We will see what remains of the Bled Pledge.
Yes.
Very much looking forward to your remarks. Very delighted to welcome to the stage a gentleman who needs no introduction to the Bled Strategic Forum. He's a very regular face here, year in, year out. The Prime Minister of Croatia, Andrej Plenković, ladies and gentlemen. Prime Minister, good to see you. And ladies and gentlemen, I can speak from personal experience when I say a speaker, a leader who makes every panel more entertaining, the Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama, ladies and gentlemen.
So you are staying with me here? Staying with me here or not?
No, not this year. Not this year, Edi Rama, for good reason, I believe. But I'm delighted to see you back. And last, but certainly not least, delighted to welcome to the stage the Prime Minister of Montenegro, Milojko Spajic, ladies and gentlemen. Very good to meet you. And the moderator of this session, very, very delighted to welcome her to the stage, the director of the Istituto Affari Internazionali in Italy, Natalie Tocci, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. And Natalie, great to have you. And before we start, yes please, before we start, this year we have a different setting. Usually you dive right into the conversation, but we are very, very delighted to have a very special guest here with us who will give an input, if you will, make the intro to this panel. I'm delighted to see him here and welcome him now to the stage for a keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the European Council and former Prime Minister of Portugal, António Costa.
Madam President, dear Robert, dear Eddie, Mr. Prime Minister, dear Andrej, Marta, let me begin by expressing my sincere thanks to our Slovenian hosts for their generous hospitality and for once again making Bled a place where Europe gathers not only to reflect, but to think strategically, challenge assumptions and shape the future. And congratulations for this 20th anniversary. At this critical moment, as the tectonic plates of global order continue to shift, allow me to speak frankly about three things. First, the main events that shaped this summer. Second, what the European Union stands for, and third, how the European Union can become stronger and safer in today's world. In what the European Union is concerned, this summer was defined by two important developments. The European Union-United States Framework Trade Agreement and renewed diplomatic efforts surrounding the war in Ukraine. I'm aware that the frustration felt by many Europeans who perceive the Union as having been too passive in shaping these developments. Let me address this directly. We certainly do not celebrate the return of tariffs or the limitations of an unbalanced trade framework. But we must be honest about the broader picture. In today's interconnected world, trade diplomacy, and security inevitably influence each other. Trade is one dimension of our relationship with the United States. Security, especially during a war on our doorstep, is an existential concern. Escalating tensions with a key ally over tariffs while our eastern border is under threat would have been an imprudent risk. That is why, at this moment, we chose diplomacy over escalation. We gave space to dialogue, to choose restraint, because we are responsible. Stabilizing transatlantic relations and ensuring United States engagement in Ukraine's security has been a top priority. The European Union did not start a trade war, but yes, we refrain from retaliation, protect our own interest, the interest of European consumers by not taxing them with tariffs, the interest of business by providing predictability, and ensuring that our products and services are not at a disadvantage in relation to other exporters to the United States. That said, our partners, including the United States, must know that the European Union will always defend its sovereignty, its citizens, its companies, and its values. Diplomacy should never be mistaken for complacency. It is true that this moment proved once again that our powerful single market of 450 million consumers, our rules-based approach, are not sufficient. We must become more autonomous, more resilient, and more prepared to act, more sovereign. We cannot anymore rely just on our allies when facing threats. We must take greater responsibility for our own destiny. And that is why today I want to affirm one clear message on behalf of the European Union. We stand for a world where peace is protected, partnerships are genuine, and where the principles of the United Nations Charter are upheld not just in words, but in action. Europe does not retreat, Europe engages. First, Europe has stood firmly with Ukraine against Russia's war of aggression as the truly indispensable partner. Our support has helped Ukraine remain sovereign after more than 3 years of war. Together with our member states, the EU has mobilized over 170 billion, the largest contribution from any global donor supporting Ukraine's defense, economy, energy grid, and institutions. Our security is tied to Ukraine's resilience, but equally to the idea that power cannot trump law. We are also supporting Ukraine's reconstruction and its path to the European Union membership. This is not a political slogan. It is a strategic reality that we are shaping every day. Secondly, in the Middle East, we are witnessing a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza that shocks the conscience of the world. The scale of civilian suffering, especially among children, is appalling and unacceptable. As the resolution presented by Slovenia in the United Nations Security Council stated, the use of starvation as a weapon of war is prohibited under international humanitarian law. Regrettably, while supported by 14 out of 15 Council members, this resolution was blocked by the United States. The European Union has consistently condemned the Hamas terrorist attacks of October the 7th and continues to call for the unconditional release of all hostages. At the same time, the right to self-defense does not justify the indiscriminate destruction of civilian infrastructures or the collective punishment of an entire population. We must be unequivocal. International humanitarian law applies to all parties. We are deeply concerned by actions that threaten the viability of a future Palestinian state, particularly the expansion of settlements in West Bank and the ongoing displacement in Gaza. These developments risk undermining peace and destabilizing the broader region, and for sure our friends from Egypt and Jordan can explain here very clearly. We therefore call for an immediate and sustained ceasefire, an unhindered humanitarian access, a halt of illegal settlement activity, and a renewed international commitment to a two-state solution. The European Union remains the leading donor of humanitarian aid to Palestinian people. European funding has kept hospitals, schools and institutions running, providing more than 450 million since the start of this war. We are actively supporting diplomatic efforts, and Palestinians representatives must obviously be allowed to participate in international fora, including or especially the United Nations General Assembly and the upcoming conference on the conflict. The Palestinian people deserve peace, dignity and statehood, and that this is also the most sustainable path to the security for the Israeli people. We believe both are possible, but only if we act together, engaging more actively with our partners in the region and speaking with one strong European voice. And let me be clear, unanimity in the common foreign and security policy is not a right to veto, but on the contrary, the special responsibility for each member state to build compromises in the spirit of loyal cooperation. Thirdly, geopolitical naivety is over. That is why we are massively increasing our defense investments to reinforce our own security, strengthen our industries and create jobs across Europe. This will also enhance our credibility and influence on the global stage. Peace without defense is an illusion. Soft power alone is not enough in a world where hard power too often prevails. In the meantime, contrary to the worst predictions, we have succeeded in keeping the United States engaged in NATO and committed with Europe's eastern security. Diplomacy still works and the transatlantic bond holds. The United States accounts for 20% of our exports and 13% of our imports. But the remaining 80% of the global economy also matters, and Europe must engage with it more actively. That is why we are building stronger trade and industrial partnerships across the globe. We are advancing deals with Mercosur, Mexico, India, Indonesia, Philippines and Thailand, not just to boost trade, but to increase predictability and resilience. Diversification makes our supply chains more secure and reduce strategic dependencies, especially in critical raw materials. Our updated global gateway strategy is expanding our cooperation across Central Asia, the South Caucasus, Latin America and Africa. It is a trade and investment agenda based on sustainability, digital innovation, labor rights, and climate alignment. Because trade deals, not tariffs, deliver real benefits for countries, companies, and citizens. Europe remains a reference point, not through coercion, but through example. For decades, the European Union has helped lift millions out of poverty and has stood for development, democracy, and peace. Our soft power is not naive, it's necessary. In the fragmented world, our contribution is needed more than ever. And finally, let me conclude by addressing our own future. The European Union is not a closed club. We are a community of values and a project of peace and prosperity. And that project is not yet complete. The accession path of the Western Balkans, Moldova and Ukraine are not just promises. They are priorities. These countries are at the heart of Europe and they are part of Europe's future. In the coming years, we must prepare the Union for enlargement through reforms, budget adjustments, and strengthened governance. Enlargement will not be easy, but it will be worth it. It is the best investment we can make to reconcile nations and histories and to build a more united continent. We will continue to work with all accession partners and take advantage of its positive momentum on enlargement. The European Union's growth plan for the Western Balkans is a potential game changer, offering financial support and incentives for reforms, regional cooperation, and economic integration. We must not lose this momentum. All leaders must do their part. All parties must take responsibility. Because this is not about geography. It is about values, democracy, human rights, freedom, rule of law. This enlargement presents a significant challenge for the European Union and its member states, but is even more demanding for the Western Balkans countries. And the greatest difficulty is not the required reforms or the negotiation of various chapters and clusters. The real challenge lies in adopting a new culture mindset, overcoming historical conflicts in order to build a shared future. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's fragmented world, the European Union chooses to act, not through power alone, but through partnership, principle and perseverance. We will stand with those who uphold international law, not with those who seek to dismantle it. We will keep building a stronger Europe, not for ourselves alone, but for the benefit of global peace, justice and cooperation. This is Europe's promise. This is Europe's purpose. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, President Costa, for those important words, and good afternoon to you all. Back to school, back to Bled. Here we are, another year, and here we are to discuss, once again, an extremely important topic. Enlargement, the Bled Pledge. Where are we on that Bled Pledge? A couple of years since it was announced. Now, as we all know, enlargement up until Russia's large-scale invasion of Ukraine was kind of almost dead in the water. Russia's invasion revived, in many respects, enlargement, and it revived enlargement for the very simple reason that enlargement was no longer viewed as being optional. It was no longer viewed as being a nice but not a necessary to have. There was no stable grey zone in between the European Union and what lied to the east, and therefore all of a sudden enlargement once again was understood as being strategic, as being in our own interests, as being perhaps even existential. And it is really in this context that the Bled Pledge was made. Now, I think in fairness what we can say a couple of years on is that a number of very important things have happened. New countries have been recognized as candidates to enlargement. Accession negotiations have been opened with several others. Accession talks have been accelerated with a couple represented here on stage today. And as President Costa was reminding us, we also have a growth plan. So I think, if we really do want to look at the glass half full, it's fair to say that indeed there have been important steps being made. But for true believers in enlargement, for enlargement enthusiasts, I think as many of us in this room are, we tend to look often also at the glass being half empty. What is it that we could do more? What is it that we can do to accelerate further? What is it that we can actually do to ensure that that Bled Pledge is not only met, but perhaps we can even anticipate it by a couple of years? And in order to discuss this question, Ali has already introduced them. We have an absolutely stellar panel to discuss them with us, and especially indeed for those that would like to see the process accelerating even further, there are, I think, at least a couple of questions or challenges that I think would be extremely important to discuss over the next hour or so. The first is what I would define as being the poison in the enlargement process. And the poison in the enlargement process is the bilateralization and the politicization of the enlargement process. The way in which some member states have, and this is not an entirely new phenomenon, but it's certainly a phenomenon that has become graver over time, have hijacked the enlargement process for reasons that have very little to do with the EU's own interests and values. So that's, in a sense, one challenge that I'd like to put on the table. And then, of course, there is another broader challenge, which is the fact that, particularly I think if we think back, a year ago, many of us thought and really believed that with this new political institutional cycle that began, enlargement would be the priority. It would really be up there in terms of what is it that the EU set out to achieve. And whereas, of course, it is a priority, the last year has inevitably perhaps seen a number of other important issues on the table. Defence, obviously, being one, the broader question of competitiveness. As President Costa was reminding us, obviously, the trade issue and the tariff war with the United States. And so here we are in a situation in which glass half full, a lot has been achieved. Glass half empty, a lot more can and should be achieved. And so perhaps to kick us off with the discussion, Commissioner Kos, let me begin with you. You're also obviously a real believer in enlargement, and not only are you a believer in enlargement, but you're putting a hell of a lot of energy into actually making the Bled Pledge a reality. So let me perhaps begin by asking you, what is it that you can actually do, or we can actually collectively do, to make sure that enlargement is actually bumped up that list of priorities facing the European Union?
Yes, indeed. I see the enlargement process as much more than making our European Union bigger in the number of square kilometers or in the number of people. For me, enlargement today is really what we have heard from the Slovenian president before. It is also a kind of unification of Europe, which we haven't had before in our history. And what can we do? It will be soon that I will be 1 year commissioner, and 2-3 more very much important points. First, the red line, what I see in my work, also working with the candidate countries, is the importance of leadership. It cannot be, the accession process cannot be successful if it's not led by the leaders, like we have Milojko and Edi today, who first believe themselves that the best for their country is the EU membership. They live this, they show this. And of course, for this we need leaders who are able to put reforms over day-to-day businesses, who know how to resolve the bilateral issues. You've been speaking about this, Antonio also. And third, who also understand, I call this the soft point, that it's their task to bring the people of their country to this so-called soft point when everybody will understand, indeed, it is moving and we are doing it and we are making it. The accession process is not only about what we do in Brussels or what the leaders do. It is about how public is supporting it, the parliament is supporting it, and civil society. First point. The second point is there are no shortcuts. You've been speaking about the pledge of Mr. Borrell. He was speaking about that 2 sides should be ready in 2030. The candidate countries, but also we. But in order that we will be able to accept the new member states, they have to deliver. So no shortcuts, meaning the rule of law, human rights, anti-corruption, free media are non-negotiable. So all this has to be fulfilled. The third important thing I would name is the geopolitics has changed. We are now confronted with the fact that they are, I call them, external disruptive forces who would like to see us fail. If I very simplify, in the past it has been, if a candidate country has fulfilled the criteria, it could enter. Now we have external forces who would like to see us, Europe, fail, and candidates too. We saw what happened in Georgia. We have a very important elections at the end of September in Moldova, where we see that Russia is really fighting against the present government who has chosen, and the people who has chosen the European path.
Thank you so much, Marta, for this. And indeed, let me now turn to the candidate countries. And as I was hinting at earlier, both Albania and Montenegro, in fact, do represent, I think at this point in time, really the front runners in this process. And I think, really the countries that if we are to meet the Bled pledge and do better, they are the ones that seem to be really quite well on the way. So, Eddie, perhaps let me begin with you and perhaps turn to you, paraphrasing what Marta was saying. What is it that you are doing to actually put reforms above the day-to-day politics? And, what is it that you can tell us today to persuade us that Albania actually is on track, not for 2030, but as you yourself said, for 2027? Persuade us that this is indeed what is happening and how Albania is actually going to meet that pledge.
Thank you. And first of all, it's really very nice to be here in the 20th anniversary of this forum, although I have not followed the whole 20. And I want to make very quick two remarks. Number one, I saw the film and I was amazed to see our former president being the same. Like Slovenia, by the way, every time I come here, nothing changes, the same. Perfect. And the second remark is, I don't know for what reason, maybe it's strategic, but the chairs become tinier and tinier and tinier. More and more uncomfortable. Maybe you have a message through the chairs, I don't know. This panel only. just to tell us don't.
There's a reason.
Just to give to just to tell us we have to finish quick. But if you wanted us to finish quick, first of all, no Italian moderator, because they become the main player. And second, no Balkan people, and no candidates, which are even more frustrating. So, no, I think it's not that we are saying that we are ready for 2027, but it's that thanks to a Slovenian record breaker in swimming, we have a very clear objective put on our table by the Commission, challenging us to deliver on all benchmarks and on all criteria, and to end the negotiations until 2027. And then, of course, it will be the member states, and it's another part of the process. So what we are doing is exactly that. We are pushing and pushing and pushing and not asking questions, because the best thing to do with the European Union is to be free when you talk in Bled, but to say yes, 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 yes every time they say to you, you have to do this, you have to do this.
They're not negotiations.
So if you mix Bled with Brussels, then you are F. So if you don't want to be effed, you have to do in Bled the sharing of the vision and different opinions and everything you want to express, and then go to Brussels and simply be a very, very diligent student. But this being said, I want to say that there is no rush, because I believe that the most important part, for us at least, Albania, Montenegro is a big country, I'm talking about Albania, it's to use the process of the accession as a process of state building, because Europe is a bless for a country like us, because it's the only place where you can get the knowledge of how to build institutions. We never had institutions before in the real sense, and to build institutions is the most difficult exercise. And this is what makes the difference between Afghanistan, Iraq, or name it, where our very dear friends from the other side of the ocean have thought that with bombs and with values you can change the country, but it's not the case. What we have in Europe, although we got out of a history that was similar, very similar, Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever, in terms of lack of freedom, in terms of all brutalities, is the know-how of institution buildings. And so for this, I tell to everyone back home, we have to be diligent and to do the work. It's not something we necessarily like, you know. We don't necessarily like to have the traffic as perfect as in Germany, but we have to do it. And Europe is here to learn us, to teach us how to have traffic lights and how to have good circulation within the institutional life. It's something amazing, and we are progressing. But beyond the leadership, I must say, in our case, the Albanian people, we are far from the second in terms of being Euro-optimistic, because we love Europe unconditionally, and although Europe has made us suffer a lot, we have the full conviction that we are going to marry one day. So finally finally they have cut some of the bullshit, which took for many years saying, we love you, but we are not ready to talk to you. We love you, but now they are talking. So there is a step further, as Marta says, I say is marriage-based, she says is merit-based, so we need to deserve the marriage, and we are working for it.
Thank you, Eddie. And Milojko, let me turn to you on this. Tell us about your true love for the European Union. Tell us about what you are doing to persuade this at times rather difficult entity, animal, to indeed engage in marriage. And tell us what you're doing on, again, coming back to Marta's point, on putting reforms above the domestic fray of politics, and perhaps above all, what more could you do?
Well, first of all, yes, Montenegro, it is a small country in many ways, but it's one way, it's a very big one. And I thank Eddie for mentioning that, because I think Montenegro is the most ethnically diversified country in Europe, by far. We don't have ethnic majority. The only country in Europe that doesn't have ethnic majority. So everything has to be built by the compromise. And by the inclusive approach that includes everybody. And when I say everybody, it's not like Finnish, Norwegians and Danes. It's Montenegrins, Serbs, Albanians, Croats, Bosniaks, and other folks from the Balkans. The usual suspects that created instability for decades before, etc., etc. So you can imagine the amount of challenge that we are facing, obviously, in Montenegro, but winning this quote-unquote war in Montenegro, it's a small EU in a nutshell. It's a small Balkans in a nutshell. If we do this by values, and the way we are going to build a consensus is around European Union, obviously, accession, that's number one. Number two, it's about the economy. And number three is about the rule of law. Treating everybody fairly and squarely, regardless of their ethnic background. And, this is what is really important, and I think we managed to do it to the big extent, obviously. In Montenegro now, within the majority, we have all the parliamentary Albanian, Serb, and Bosniak parties, that are obviously Montenegrins as well, but I'm saying those from the region, which was unthinkable before. Now we have them all in the government, in the majority, deciding together. And we just had
only the Germans to be an EU...
and Italians.
A German minority there.
So the thing is we had a big reform just recently, and we had whole parliament voting unisonly on electoral reform, which was a really big one. It was impossible to do it for like decades. The same was about the Constitutional Court and many other reforms that we couldn't really do for decades. Now we can do all of these things with more than 2/3 of the majority voting in favor, because of these three things. And this is what unifies the country. And this is what should unify us all in the European Union as well. I lived more than a decade in Asia. In Singapore, Japan, China. I've been to India many times. I've been to Indonesia many times. And yes, Montenegro is ethnically diverse, but looking from that perspective, all of our differences, they are ridiculous. In Montenegro you have Bosniak, Serbian, Croatian, and Montenegrin language, which is basically completely interchangeable. We can understand each other completely. We basically eat the same food. Our culture is almost the same, or it is the same. The differences are tiny. And we make them so big because we focus on the past and we don't focus on the future. Right. It's about time we just focus on the future. Or we're going to be insignificant. We are becoming insignificant, but we are going to be even more insignificant if we don't focus on the future, if we don't focus on what's ahead of us, because Asia is focused. Very, very focused. Next 3-4 years are going to be monumental in terms of the change, the amount of change, the exponential change that's coming in next 3 or 4 years in AI, in other big technologies, is going to be monumental. We cannot miss this opportunity. So, yes, Europe is unified in our diversity. Great. Now let's move on and let's focus on the future. And we have to focus on some of the things that very smart people like Mario Draghi already made it for us. Let's remove the internal barriers. We're talking about, tariff barriers with US. How about we focus on our own internal barriers? They're like huge. Right. They're really preventing us from being really a single market. And I'm talking as somebody who is not even part of the single market. Yet. But we are becoming slowly, like SEPA now and some other folks. So innovation, investing in innovation, making a good regulatory environment for innovation. Like 2 of our countries, we are small countries. We can be test beds for innovation. Together with the European Commission, we can sit down and say, hey, if it works out in Albania,